What's up, Zach here, and I just finished my first day at the BNP Paribas Open. A lot of it had to do with checking out Lorenzo Sonego playing in the Mizuno Wave Exceed Tour 6. Now, I have had quite the experience in these over the last few days, actually playing in them, but watching him in them, a lot of, my experiences were really cemented in watching him, and a lot of my opinions of this shoe were really cemented in watching him as well. Let's get into it.
And a big thanks to Tennis Warehouse and Mizuno for getting me a pair of these over to check out. However, this video is by no means sponsored, and all opinions, good, bad, and indifferent, are always my own.
Now, starting off in the uppers, it doesn't look like there's much different from the 5s to the 6s, and all the changes are subtle, but very, very significant. Now, it is still 3/4, polyurethane upper. The thing is about this one is because it's dimpled all throughout, and just because the upper material underneath of it, the meshing, is just a little bit more flowing and forgiving, the uppers just break in a lot easier, a lot quicker. There isn't the bending and snapping that I've seen on some previous models. Just feels a lot more glove-like around your foot, almost like the A6 Core FF2 did. Just really nice intimate contact around the top or dorsum of your foot. Now, the tongue in these is razor thin, and you do actually get a runner's knot here in the lace line, and I actually thought that these tie down pretty decently without a runner's knot, but if you want to eliminate the heel slippage, you probably should be using that runner's knot. Problem is the tongue isn't all that long for that, so you either have to put some moleskin underneath the top here to not get irritation, or you got to wait until the shoe breaks in the midsole, you sink down a little bit further in there. So that was the one little irritating part there. Now, the interesting thing is you look at the breathability test on these things, they only heated up 118.1 degrees. Now, for some shoes, that's a lot. For a shoe with all polyurethane in the upper, that is pretty darn good. If you look at the breathability mapping of this, there was more airflow through this thing than I thought there was going to be. Still isn't the most breathable shoe out there. I mean, anything with polyurethane in there, it's gonna trap some heat and moisture, but because the shoe is so light, and I hate to say it, because the tongue is so thin, it is still gonna exchange a lot of heat and moisture through that area. It's just you are giving up a little bit of, I'd say, comfort aspects of it to get that little bit of extra breathability. And on the upper durability test, 10-second Tires Grit sandpaper, I mean, it's polyurethane upper, so it's not gonna do that much damage. In terms of dragging or sliding, you're gonna start to wear through a little bit of that foam interface before you wear anything down in the uppers. But 100,000% the biggest upgrade in the Wave Exceed Tour 6s is in the midsole. Now you've got the Pounce foam in the rear foot and then the Enerzy next throughout the entire rest of the foot, right? Like more of like a 3/4 or 90% length Enerzy foam. Now those are both EVA based foams. We've seen Enerzy before, but this is Enerzy next. What I found with this is almost like in the Lacoste AGLT 23 Ultra, where the stack isn't super high in it, but the foam makeup is so premium. It is just so well tuned in that even though you get a lot of ground contact and ground feel, you do not get a lot of bottoming through the shoe. It felt super bouncy, super lively in the forefoot. I mean, it just split stepping, getting up on the balls of your feet just feels so easy in these things. In terms of a tennis shoe, honestly, I think it's fine that they put a little bit of a softer foam back there. If you're someone that does rock back on their heels, heavier player that plays back on more flat-footed, more back-footed, you're probably gonna start to wear that foam down a little bit quicker. If you look at the bounce height test on these things, got 31 centimeters in the heel and then 34 in the forefoot. You can just see that the rear foot is just meant for a little bit more shock absorption on these. But honestly, for what this foam is, how deadened some of the other Wave Exceed Tours felt to me, this was definitely a very pleasant surprise. Plus, they ditched that separated serrated shank on the previous models just for a latticed shank on the bottom here. This thing gets a shank score of 0.2, presence of a shank, and technically it does cross the rear foot into the midfoot. So a lot better protection of that foam. You're gonna get a lot more durability out of that foam versus previous Wave Exceed Tour models, just because they're actually putting a legitimate shank in this one, not more of those real flexible, I guess, more gimmicky shanks that they had in previous models. But where the 6s really become a tale of two shoes is in the outsole tread. You get this really giant macro razor triangular pattern here on the lateral forefoot, and then, quasi herringbone, pretty flat here under the ball of the foot, and then obviously it's flipped in the rear foot. Because the tread is perpendicular to your plane of motion mostly, even though it's more flat under the medial side or first metatarsal head, these things still will grip when you want them to. It was surprising to me, even though I saw, I was like, okay, it's a little more perpendicular, but it's flat and maybe they'll slide. Yeah, they will slide if given enough force, but for a gripping shoe, I actually thought these were one of the better pivoting shoes out there. Now, when I was watching Lorenzo Sonengo play, he was sliding these. Obviously, you know, he can put a lot of force through the shoe, but he was also gripping and pivoting pretty easily too. These shoes were screeching on court for him, and I noticed that he was getting quite a bit of stability on these when cornering as well. So the other thing I noticed about the outsole was that the rear foot is squared off a little bit more. It does get pretty narrow there in the rear foot. So these are definitely meant for more being up on the balls of your foot, right? You could tell Mizuno kind of cut some weight by taking the rear foot, making it a little bit more streamlined so that you're, you know, want to be up on the balls of your foot. And that was an area they thought they could make the shoe, number one, a little bit more nimble, but also a little bit more light. And so, I mean, speaking of the cutout in the rear foot, you look at the speed ratio, comes in at a 2.46. Shank score of 0.2 brings it up to a 2.66. And I mean, I think if you, number one, are a lighter player who can bring a lot of speed to the table, these things are going to be absolute gazelles for you. They do not have the more dull feeling of the Wave Exceed Tour 4s and 5s. Definitely a little bit springier underfoot. They don't encumber you whatsoever, right? So, you know, if you look at the grip test ramp, you know, honestly, a lot of the things I felt on court and I saw on court really brought to life there. It didn't slip till 42 degrees, which is just as good as any other, you know, more grip and stability focused shoe out there. So I'd say if you're looking for a shoe for real cutting power, speed that goes from doubles alley to doubles alley, as well as short court speed, then I think these things have you covered in spades. Just remember, the profile of them is going to change once they start wearing down, right? Once the rubber starts wearing in, breaking down, they're gonna slide a little bit easier. Really, kind of an all-around shoe. It's just, if you want to slide in them, you better give them a little bit more break-in, or you better be really adept at sliding. Otherwise, you're going to be in for a little bit more rubber break-in until these start going a little bit more easy for you sliding into your shots. Now, the fit of the Tour 6s is a little bit of a conundrum. Their width is actually very generous, 9.4 centimeters for my men's size 11 foot. It's just that the inflare of them is just a little bit more acute than some other shoes. That comes in a 9 centimeter inflare, which isn't crazy. I've seen higher, but it's definitely not a low inflared shoe. So if you are somebody with a tailor's bunny and a real wide pancake flat foot, you are still maybe going to bump into the side of the shoe on the lateral side. So I'd say a narrow and medium foot, you can just go true to size. A 2E, if you're the right shape for them, true to size for me, I really had no problems. And I have a C-shaped foot though, so these fit me very, very well. If you're somebody that has a little more of an outflared foot or a pancake flat foot, then sure, I would be going up a half size in these. The thing is, you don't want to be going up too high in size in this because you're going to start to get into heel slip territory, and then you're going to have to use that runner's knot, and then you're going to start to get into issues with the tongue. So you want these to fit as one-to-one as humanly possible, right? If you're a really short-toed, short-foot person and narrow, and you may even consider going down a half size in these just to get better coverage of the tongue on your foot. Now, in terms of the snake-bitten foot, for ball of foot pain, for a more minimalist, you know, movement focused shoe, this one, the Lacoste AGLT 23 Ultra, both of those I think are really one of the better ones out there at this point. For that player with ball of foot pain that also still wants a speed focused, more minimalist, more kind of quick, rapid shoe. In terms of heel pain and arch pain, honestly, these are much better than their predecessors in terms of that heel pain or arch pain. If you can get a very low, very, very low profile orthotic in these, once you've broken in the midsole, I think then they'll be okay. And honestly, on their own, they're pretty darn good. It's just once the foam wears down, like once you get into the later stages of this shoe, that's where I think you're gonna start to see a little bit of issue just because of how soft the foam is in the heel. That's gonna take a while, especially if you're a lighter player, but if you can break the foam in, get yourself seated a little bit better, and then throw a low profile orthotic in these, then I think that bumps these up to just as good as pretty much anything else, as long as you're not getting the heel slippage.
So in terms of playability, obviously I had to bring in a real expert. This is Chris from Tennis Warehouse with me at the BNP Paribas Open. I actually thought these played so much better than the last two lines, mainly because of the foam in the forefoot. I feel like I had a ton more bounce on these. Just an incredibly better sensation underfoot versus the more deadened feeling, I should say, of the 4s and the 5s. I feel like these remind me a lot more of the Wave Enforce Tours versus old Wave Exceed Tours. So, Chris, what do you think?
Yeah, super plush ride. And this one, for a shoe that gets you as close to the ground as it does,
yeah,
it's really comfortable. I like the way the uppers flexed with my feet too. It felt natural. You know, it's one of those shoes I could put on and just kind of forget about it and just focus on my tennis. That's always a good thing in a shoe. My one knock on it is up around the end of the eyelets there. The tongue is super short. It just needs to be a little bit longer. It's also really thin, and I have a narrow foot, so I need to really cinch the laces down to get a snug fit around my foot, and I could feel some lace pressure through the tongue of that one.
If you're trying to put a runner's knot in these, unfortunately, you are going to start to get a little bit of pinching there, here and there. Once the midsole breaks down a little bit, that gets better and better, but you're kind of going to have to wait for that. So overall, though, from the 4s and the 5s, I can't even begin to tell you how much better of a shoe this is playability-wise. And make sure you check out Chris and the rest of the wear testers and play testers on Tennis Warehouse YouTube channel. I'll leave that link down below as well. Thanks again, Chris, for joining me. Anything else to say?
That's it, mate. Thank you.
All right, so before I get on this plane back home, I guess I should answer the question, is the Wave Exceed Tour 6 another shoe of the year from Mizuno? I think at least it gets them into the conversation for shoe of the year. Definitely one of the most improved shoes. We've seen a lot of really improved shoe lines this year. The Wave Exceed Tour 6 is no different. I think with my review, I think I was just so blown away by the upgrades to it that I started thinking shoe of the year. To me, after having them on for a while, me personally, I still like the Wave Enforce Tour a little bit more for my foot, right? I know there's a lot of people who are huge fans of the Wave Exceed Tour line, and I'm really curious to hear especially what you think after having experience with the 4s and 5s especially. Like I said, I think it deserves to be in the conversation up there, especially for most improved shoe and one of the best speed focus shoes out there. So I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you're gonna be picking up a pair of these, or if, you know, we'll see what happens with clay season if you're trying to pick up a pair of these in the clay treads. Let me know in the comments down below. And if you do want to see the older sibling to the Wave Exceed Tour 6, one of the shoes that's near and dear to my heart, the Wave Enforce Tour going to the knife, make sure you click into this feed up above and subscribe down below. Respect your rubber and foam. I'll see you somewhere in the Sneakerverse.